What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video and another prospect deep dive. Today, I talk with a Western Kentucky expert on Malachi Corley and what the New York Jets can expect from their third-round pick. All right, I'd like to welcome on Stephen Moffett of the Topper Talk podcast. Today, we'll be talking some Malachi Corley. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, sir. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Every year after the NFL draft, I was just telling you, I like to give Jet fans a little bit more insight onto the players that they are adding through the NFL draft. And this year, Jets traded up in the third round. They love themselves some Malachi Corley. So figured that I would bring someone who got to watch him play at the collegiate level and covered him up close on to go into a little bit more detail on Malachi. But you were telling me before we got started here, just mentioning the type of character he is. So maybe we'll start there with the kind of guy Malachi Corley is, even off the field.
Yeah, he's a guy that was a constant presence in the community. He did a lot of community service. And some of that stuff was required through their NIL partnerships, etc. But he was the kind of guy that once he was there, if he only had to be there an hour, 2 hours, he might be there 3, 4 hours later. He just once he was locked in and having fun with kids or whatever event he was at, he's just a very outgoing personality, very easy to talk to, very approachable. If you just see him in the community on campus, after a game, wherever it is, he's just an easy guy to like. He always has a smile on his face, unless you're, in between those sideline to sideline. If you're meeting him on the gridiron, maybe not so friendly, but if you're meeting him just out, personal in the community, great kid, really good football player, but an even better person.
That's awesome. So glad to hear that about Malachi Corley, and really interesting path at the collegiate level. So started out as a running back, a later converted wide receiver. So I wanted to ask you kind of the progression, I guess, year over year in college and how he improved as a receiver over time.
Yeah, he was, recruited from a small school in Campbellsville, Kentucky. A 1A school, which in the class of Kentucky high school football, that's the smallest division. It goes up to 5A. So 1A being the smallest class division. He was just an all-around type player, a player that you just wanted to find a way to give him the ball. Primarily, he was that running back. I think he also played some defensive back as well. Ended up on campus at one of our position skill camps that we had in the summer, earned him a scholarship offer. When he came to campus as a running back, quote unquote, um, I think it was quickly seen that, he has just all the instincts and traits that you just want to get him the ball. He wanted to earn himself onto the field any way possible. They made a pretty early position switch with him his first year here. And you could just see, from the first full season that he played with Bailey Zappi and Zach Kitley here, running an offense. He's the third or fourth, maybe even the fifth option down the totem pole of wide receivers. It's his first year, redshirt freshman year playing. And he just absolutely earned his playing time. Everything you threw his way, he caught. The tough balls over the middle, the yards after the catch. He was just that guy that was very dependable and just made you play him. And then as you saw him get some confidence, the last 2 years, he became the primary receiver. His progression was just the confidence side of it, not being a wide receiver coming out of high school, and then developing into that go-to guy that even when you knew, short passing down distance, you knew it was going to Malachi. He's still going to make that play. He's going to get the ball, and then he's probably going to run through you and get another 5, 6, 7, 8 yards after the catch. So his progression has just been, that confidence in himself, that belief in himself that, was probably always there just because he came from a high school. He's probably that best athlete on the field. But then when it translated over to the college game and he was just constantly probably one of the best players on the field at all times, no matter who we were playing. Um, it was just fun to watch and really special that, he stayed here his entire career.
Absolutely. And, watching the tape on him, the yards after the catch ability stands out and was obviously one of his strengths. But I want to ask you about the route tree that he ran in college. And if the potentially limited route tree is something that we should be concerned about in the transition to the NFL, or if you're confident based on his abilities that he could grow as a route runner.
Yeah, I think that was one of his biggest question marks, coming out this last year, declaring for the draft, as he went through the postseason carousel of, the going to the Reese's Bowl and then the combine and then pro day and then doing all the top 30 visits. Probably the number one question he had to answer was, are you more than just a gadget player? Because most of his film, a lot of his tape is just him getting a ball thrown out in the flat with some blockers in front of him and let him go make a play. And I think he showed that he intentionally, at the Senior Bowl and at his pro day when he had a lot of scouts, a lot of people, NFL eyes on him. He expanded and opened up that route tree just to show that he can run it. He can run posts, digs, slants, corner routes, whatever it may be. Over the middle to the sideline. Curls, quick comebacks, whatever it is, he can run all those routes. It just wasn't the way that Western Kentucky and Coach Helton and the several offensive coordinators that he played under, they just didn't utilize him that way. They had other guys that were running those routes. He was somebody that they wanted to get him the ball in space, or they wanted to get him the ball with blockers in front of him, which is why you saw so many of those screen plays. And just what he did after the catch was made, obviously, is history at this point. But that is his biggest question mark. He has to, continue to improve on that because he hasn't done it a lot under the lights. He doesn't have college film with the full route tree being ran. So that will be something he has to continue to work on and develop as, you get into this summer and training camp and, eventually fall camp before the season begins. But with his just mentality, his determination, his will to be great, that kind of that underdog chip on his shoulder that he has. I have no doubt in my mind that wherever the Jets decide to line him up on the field and ask him to run, if they're trying to put the ball in his hands, he's going to succeed one way or the other.
Yeah, it really seems that way just by watching him and his mindset. This also seems like a pick that Aaron Rodgers was heavily involved with, which is exciting. Aaron Rodgers tweeted shortly after the pick went in, and when speaking with the media, Malachi Corley made a comment that he wants to stay at his guest house and be right in his pocket. But you love to see that from a young guy coming into the league and wanting to get that, the connection with the quarterback. And like you said, some of it too has to do with scheme. Like, if the offense was just built for him to catch the short to intermediate stuff, and there weren't really the opportunities for him deeper down the field, is that on the prospect, or is it on more of the system? And this seems like a system thing for him. I'm curious to see how he transitions though at the next level with some deeper route concepts and how the Jets use him there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's coming into a really good situation. I don't know a ton about the Jets organization, but we've had a player, George Fant, that was there. Mike
There.
White was a quarterback there for a while. So I kept up a little bit with the Jets organization just because we've had some of our former players that have played there. I know your roster is just littered with a lot of young talent, a lot of especially the skill position players. And then you've got, old head Aaron Rodgers leading the way as the quarterback. I think he's almost coming into a perfect situation where he's not going to be thrust, as wide receiver one and expected to do everything. He can be that third, fourth option, similar to how he was his first year here when he broke onto the scene. He's not that primary guy, but if he's somebody that, you try to match a linebacker or somebody up on him in open space, you get him the ball and then he's going to go make a play. So I think he's really coming into a really good situation to begin his pro career.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, not going to be necessarily relied on as the number one pass catcher right away, which, as you mentioned, I think is a positive for him. Some pushback that the Jets have gotten on this pick. One we talked about already, which was the route tree. But other questions that seemingly I get asked a lot, and I wanted to see your perspective on this, was his transition to the NFL because of the competition that he's played against, the conference that he's played in versus how big of a leap that's going to be to NFL competition. Your concern level with that.
coming from a Western Kentucky, a G5 smaller school in Conference USA, we don't have that week in, week out opportunity of playing, a P4, P5 schedule. Usually we're playing one or two in the non conference. But over Malachi's career, as we played, Ohio State this last year, Auburn 2 years ago, Indiana, Michigan State, Indiana again, we played them home and away in consecutive years. If you look at his tape and his stats from all those games, which granted stats don't tell the whole story, but if you watch the tape from those games, he performed in every single game. He wasn't just shut down. You didn't see him, one or two catches. He's catching 7 or 8 balls for 70, 80, 90 yards, a touchdown or two in every single game. And he's coming into the game as the guy. He's going to be the guy that's probably, if we're going to move the ball down the field, we got to get in his hands. So, I understand the level of competition concern just a tiny bit because he wasn't playing it week in and week out. But when he got that opportunity in the non-conference schedule over his 3 years here at Western, he stepped up to the plate and made plays. Then he went to the Senior Bowl and was named the offensive wide receiver of the week there at the Senior Bowl practice. Just every time he's had a chance to shine against competition, on the same level, he's proven his worth and his value that he's right there, with those guys and can compete with anybody.
Absolutely. And agree. When, keeping track of the Senior Bowl, it was big because the Jets defensive coordinator, Jeff Ulbrich, was one of the coaches down there at the Senior Bowl. So was keeping a close eye on all the different names there. And Malachi Corley was one that kept coming up, and, just a really fun player. And the more I watch his tape, it's easy to see why Rodgers and this regime, kind of fell in love with him. And some people draw the comparisons to a Deebo Samuel because similar body type, similar kind of gadget player. But do you see that, or do you think that's maybe an unfair expectation or comparison to put on Malachi Corley?
Not only do I see it, but as a 49er fan myself, I think, and Malachi will tell you this if you ever get a chance to talk to him, that I was probably one of the first guys that started calling him Deebo on Twitter. I started calling him Malachi Deebo Corley, and then it stuck for me. I call him wide receiver one, or I call him Deebo whenever I'm referring to him as our podcast account. We're talking football, but then as he got closer to draft eligibility, you really start seeing those player comparisons. They're both 5'9", 5'10". They're both 214, 215 pounds. Once they get the ball in their hands, they're electric. I think it's a really good comparison for him. Obviously that's an all-pro, perennial, really good player in a really good system. But I think it comes down to if he fits in a similar system and has, enough skill players around him, just like Deebo does, he can become a weapon immediately. And I think it's a really fair comparison. No one's going to expect that he's going to be an all-pro 2-3 years down the line. If that happens, great. I think he has all the talent and the ability in the world to get there and do that. But from a player comparison, perspective, I think there's a lot of similarities there. Obviously where they came from and how that translates to the NFL could be a totally different story. But just, on tape, it's hard to argue against. He could be a Deebo Samuel type of player in the NFL.
It's really exciting for this New York Jets offense to add a player like that. Now, something else that I wanted to get some insight from you on is with the new NFL kickoff rules, this Malachi Corley seems like a guy that would really fit in well with these rules as a returner. Did he have much of a role on special teams at Western Kentucky? And do you think that with these new rules and with kickoffs being much more impactful in the NFL in 2024, if that's maybe a way for him to get on the field?
Yeah, his first year here, his first, partial year, I think he only played 5 games his first year, and then his first full season was on special teams. I think as his role grew and he became, kind of a primary wide receiver, it's like, okay, maybe we don't want to line him up back there and get a chance to get him hurt. But yeah, the new kickoff rules, I mean, it's bringing that excitement, back to the NFL that needs to be there. The kickoffs have just turned into touchbacks basically. So now you're opening up that possibility of having a big play that could be broken. And Malachi is definitely somebody that he's a physical player. So whether he's out there, blocking whatever, if he's getting the ball in his hands and getting to return it, he's somebody that could definitely flourish. And as soon as those new rules were adopted, I saw multiple people, NFL draft guys, evaluators of just prospects and talent, kind of all saying the same thing, that, man, Malachi could be a dangerous guy with these new rules in place.
Absolutely. I think I'm looking forward to him getting some opportunities in training camp because to me, it just screams like the perfect player in that role. Steven, thank you so much for taking some time to join me today. Where can people find your work if they want to follow along with Western Kentucky?
Yeah, if they want to check us out pretty much on any social media, we're Topper Talk. Just search us. Anywhere you get podcasts, you can search Topper Talk Podcast. We did an interview with Malachi several months ago. If you want to check that out and just hear about him talking about his draft preparation and just his mindset going into this whole process that is now unfolded in front of us. So, yeah, if you want to check out more about WKU, feel free to follow along Topper Talk Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Steven for hopping on. I am Matt O'Leary, and we'll catch you guys next time.